I am so excited to be back doing this podcast, and this is the first episode where I'm also putting it up on YouTube as well to just try that out and see what happens and add some more community engagement. So without further ado, let's dive into the text, which is John chapter 15, verses 1 through 17. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this, so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. Wow, so many different things jumped out to me in this text. I've read this a lot of times, and yet this time I'm like, wait a second. I'm hearing it's more, I can hear myself reading it and how repetitive it is. And actually the repetition was interesting because, this is an oral culture. Everything, they didn't have the luxury of reading and having texts in front of them. And so usually in cultures like that, times like that, in the oral tradition, you'd have to repeat things to make emphasis. And so I wonder, if you're just listening and not even thinking, you hear the same phrases over and over again, basically, being that without Jesus, who is the vine, you can't do anything. He is the substance, he is the life force, he is the power that not only keeps the branches alive, but allows them to bear fruit at all. He says that repeatedly. And I'm curious because I know in my own brokenness that I forget that. And so I think that he's trying to remind us how necessary, how utterly reliant that we are and are supposed to be upon Jesus, who is the vine. It's so easy to go on throughout my day and my giftings even and think, well, I've got this, I know what I'm doing, and not rely on my life source. And as a counselor, I'm often convicted of this and have been in a season recently where I haven't prayed nearly as much as I usually do before sessions, during sessions, etc. Because I have enough experience and knowledge that I'm like, well, I kind of know what to do. And even though I do believe I'm being effective and fruitful, it's taken a different toll on my heart to just be doing this all on my own strength. As someone who's professionally being compassionate, I'm giving then what I don't have. And wonder how much that's affected me in this season of life because I'm not relying on my vine, Jesus. I've been relying on my own strength. And so if you're new to the show, this is one of the many times where I give my own personal experience, hopefully, so that you think and reflect too, like, where are you relying on your own strength instead of being connected? And this comes from a couple different angles too, right? Am I situating myself being connected to Jesus at the beginning of my day, throughout the day, because I just need him? It's just a culture, cultivating that sense of dependence. But then also in my strengths, even in things that I'm good at. I've taken the lens, and I think it's very beautiful, that whatever you're even amazing at, excelled at, you didn't necessarily do anything for your genetics or whatever to give you a predisposition to be better. Like the best basketball player, football player, all the things, sure, I'm not discounting that they didn't work hard at those abilities, but there's a vast difference between someone who inherently has a gift at something. They're always going to surpass, if they put in any effort at all, they're going to always surpass people that just don't have that. I have naturally really bad eye-hand coordination. I could have spent my entire life practicing any sport in the world, and I would have been in the bottom 10%. It wouldn't matter how much time I spent. But maybe I digress. The point is, even in your strength and your giftings, do you rely on the vine? So that was the first thing that jumped out to me, is this idea of the repetition. And I'm guessing it's because it's trying to hit home how desperately we are supposed to be sitting at the feet of Jesus. Looking over the text a little further, you've got this pretty standard text, like he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. I forget how many times it repeats that, but that's something I've heard, at least in my Christian walk, in Christian circles, many times. And people wrestle over that. I've heard people often even start worrying about their salvation. They're like, well, what is fruit? And how much fruit is enough fruit? And so there's many different ways to look at this. One, I would argue and encourage you to safeguard against, if you're trying to prove salvation by what you do, that is not salvation. Salvation is putting your life in submission and saying, God, I am not the leader of my life. I want to follow you. I am not Lord. You are Lord. Change me. Help me follow you. I submit to you. And that's obviously not even done perfectly. We screw up a lot along the way. But that heart change that says, I am no longer God of my life. Now, when we're talking about the fruit, so whether you go out and start, some life world-changing ministry, or you have just been being changed in your personhood, that is fruit. I think of so much of my life, not perfect, I still get angry, but I used to be just a straight up rageaholic. I used to be just awful. And when I became a Christian, I can't say that even overnight it changed, but I started realizing this is messed up. I am not treating people kindly. I get angry. Now, granted, I wasn't cussing anybody out to their face, but in my heart, I was so angry about any minute injustice or frustration, etc. And then as I became a Christian, it's this is bad. This is toxic. God changed me. Fruit happened because instead of just continuing on the exact path and business as usual, the Holy Spirit starts saying, these are things that are not of the Father. Fruit is talking to your spouse differently. It's having a different attitude about your work and not thinking that cleaning a toilet is pointless. And seeing how I'm serving my family or even the company. Or, man, if Jesus was washing feet and I feel like I'm doing a menial task, he chose to do menial tasks. What can God teach me and change me in my character as I do those tasks? So see, fruit isn't necessarily just oh my gosh, I helped someone get to know Jesus. Oh my gosh, I did this very specific kind of Christian action. It's also being changed. So think about this. If we took some of the fruit off of a tree, it's going to change immediately, pretty quickly, for the worse. It's going to change and die and wither and dry out and rot because it's no longer connected to the branch. Now, I am not a genius at horticulture, but I can only suspect if we took some dying branch, a branch that's struggling and not getting enough nutrients, and this is the part I'm totally jumping out on a limb, if we grafted it into another plant, as I know some people know how to do that, it could now actually flourish and do better. You will see change. which is interesting because the Bible talks about we have been grafted out of one tree and into the true tree. I'm totally botching that. Look it up though. The idea is that when we're connected to Jesus, things change. Either our mind changes, our heart changes, well, really both, but I'm just giving examples. Our mind, our heart, our attitude, our character. And sure, yes, we also do, and we'll see this later, acts of love. We think and talk and act differently towards other people. All that to say, it sucks when it becomes just about, am I doing enough fruit? Because that, like many things, actually takes our eyes off of Jesus. Mini soapbox here. Need maybe a truckload of salt, and let me know. Push back in the comments if I'm not being gracious enough. Excuse me. But take some of the more previous Christian cultural avenues like a Billy Graham. On one sense, I think it's so cool. He clearly was trying to serve God. He was doing so many things. But in that cultural moment in history, I know my parents were part of this, it was really like a lot of the emphasis, whether intended or not, was just say a prayer. If we can just get people to say a prayer and commit their lives to Jesus, that gets them on the right track. And here is part of the challenge that that's not necessarily even focused on Jesus, if that makes sense. Like saying a prayer to not go to hell, saying a prayer so something bad doesn't happen to you is radically different than even saying a prayer because I want to get to know the creator of the universe because I want to get to know the creator of the universe. Does that make sense? So the idea is we actually take something that is good, talking to Jesus, asking for forgiveness, praying, and we actually take the focus off of the whole point of all of this. The whole point of all of Christianity isn't to say a prayer and isn't to not go to hell. The whole point of Christianity is to be in relationship with God, to be in relationship with the living God and his son Jesus, who is also God, to walk with him this side of heaven, but even better, more importantly, the other side of heaven in the fullness of his presence, getting to see his face, getting to hug the creator of the universe and laugh with him and get to know him and spend time with him and joke with him and see all the other creations that he has made and do that in community. That's the point. I don't know about you, but I feel like 90+% of everything I ever hear about Christianity is only about sin. It's only about the cross. It's only about salvation. It's only about acts. And we miss the actual relationship with the Father, which is how the story started in the garden with the Father and two little people. And that's how the story ends, is with the Father and all of his children. So hopefully you follow the whole train of thought. The idea is you can get distracted in this verse as well by focusing on, am I doing enough fruit? Instead of, am I connecting with the vine? Because here's the oxymoron. If you're really concerned about fruit, anyways, just connect with the vine, connect with Jesus, relate with Jesus. Jesus will change you. Jesus will make you make fruit without you even really thinking about it. Because as you commune with him, think about Moses. If you remember in the Old Testament, Moses spent time with God, the Father. He didn't get to see his face. He was just in God's presence. Enough of God's presence was there that Moses' physical stature was changed. If you read the text, it says his face started glowing. So much so that the people were scared and he had to wear a veil over his face because they're like, you're glowing. You seem like a freak of nature. We don't even understand. This is scary. Now, those are people that didn't actually seemingly want to relate to God because they were actually scared by how God changed and affected Moses. But right there, you see, that's the unique, sad beauty of it all, is Moses was a prophet to the people. Israel kept straying away, but Moses wanted to spend time with God. And that's the point. When you spend time with God, he changes you. Now we're all not going to walk around with our faces glowing like Moses, but now we will see spiritual changes, character changes in us because we spend and commune with God. Okay, back over to the text. I got super excited there. Love talking about the Father and spending time with him and his effect on us, as clearly you can see. There was something about you see it right here. Okay, back down to verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Jesus just gives us the cheat sheet here, right? So I don't know about you, but I've often wondered, well, man, how do you do this thing? How do you be more like God? How do you love people? And Jesus gives us the structure. Jesus says, the Father loves me. And now what he's not saying, but we know because we've seen it throughout the text, is Jesus pulls away and retreats to spend time with the Father. He is communing with the Father. And Jesus now, he gets also another cheat that he is God and he knows to the full extent of the Father's love for him. But Jesus is fueled by the Father's love. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now, it's a comparative statement too. Like, as much as God has loved me, I'm also loving you. But it's also throughout the text, like, the love of God allows us to love other people. And he says, remain in my love. I was reading, I forget exactly what it said in my Bible study little note section, but I think it said, like, rough estimate here that in the book of John, he mentions like the word like love, like let's say 10 times throughout the book, but then exclusively in this section and these like 2 or 3 chapters where it starts with the Last Supper. He mentions like 30 times. Love is mentioned 30 times in these last portions of Jesus' life, emphasizing not many things, that his death is out of love. He is imparting his disciples with his presence, and his love is what is going to carry them to follow the Father and do the things as being loved and pursued by God so they can do that same for others. So remain in my love, and if you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I've kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Sorry, I'm just reading this again because it's really good and it kind of summarizes itself. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Again, we see that comparison that we're supposed to love like Jesus, but we're also supposed to love because we've been loved by Jesus. The biggest, most transformative factor in my life has not been theology, hasn't even purely been just reading the Bible. It's been experiencing and receiving the love of the Father that gives me a peace and changes my composure and convicts me of where I am falling radically short of loving like Jesus has loved. And that is just so heavy on my heart because I don't feel like we meditate on love and experience and even really understand it. That's what we're going to do later in today's episode. We're going to actually unpack, like, maybe this is me. I know I can be really snarky and sassy. Sometimes I get frustrated. I don't think we even know what really love is. Especially, maybe it's our Western American culture that we just say love about, I love ice cream, I love pizza, I love Stranger Things, whatever it is. And then you're not like actually even connected to what the word love means. That's one idea. And another is, I don't know about you, I can read a million different things about love or God's commands, and it is so hard to understand how to practically, in today's terms, translate that. It's like, well, great, I'm supposed to love people. What does that actually mean? We're going to get to that a little bit later. But we see here in this text, again, there's this relationship. There's a command to love like Jesus, and we're given instruction that we get that life source, we get that love by communing and worshiping and knowing and pursuing Jesus. Okay, I do want to touch on this. I know this is going to ruffle a few feathers, but I say this in love, and I say this because, man, it sucks to be a slave to this concept. So later in the verse, it's 16, I think. Ask whatever you ask in my name, I will give it to you. Now, many people, we would call them prosperity gospel individuals, will use this and other texts as if it's like a formula. Like, do this thing and then ask for some material possession and you will get it. Now, that is problematic for so many reasons, because actually, if we're pursuing the Father's heart and are in love with Jesus and know Jesus, our desire for material things will decrease. Now, I'm going to make this really practical, right? Like, I'm going to throw myself in the hot seat. I'm a nerd. I love a fast computer. I know that is the dumbest thing in the world for me. I don't want to wait more than a couple seconds for something. You could call it impatience, but when I'm like in the zone and thinking, I just want to be able to click and do all the things and not think. I think it's cool. Some people like fast cars. I like a fast computer. In my natural habitat, I would just be like, okay, let's get a new computer every 6 months, 1 year. Every time new technology comes out, let's do it. But because the Father has changed my heart and changed how I view money and what it should do and shouldn't do, and there's a balance, right? So for me, it's like I actually wait like 6 to 10 years and I try to get as close to 10 as possible. Unless something is like critical failure and it literally dies, I have to replace it. I actually forego my desire because I don't want to just be pursuing, because I know I can go there. Like, as much as it's okay and good, and I do a lot of like doing this podcast because I have a computer. Even though there's a lot of good things with it, I know where my heart goes. And I'm always just going to want more. And I'm always just going to want better. And then I'm thinking about that. And then I'm researching. And then I'm becoming consumed with it. It becomes a battle in my heart. And I share this because I know I'm not alone. I know we all have one or multiple things where we start kind of compulsively, obsessively researching, keeping track of. It's on our mind on the regular. We spend a lot of time researching it, enjoying it, or spending tons and tons of resources. And this then gets radically blown out of proportion when people start talking about having more than one house, having excess cars, luxury cars. Again, this isn't in a place of condemnation or I think I'm better than you. But you have to ask yourself, why do I care so much more, potentially, about materialistic things than just relating with people, than just enjoying what I have, than being grateful? The problem is, and we have to be, and maybe I go too far, I have no idea, but we should be incredibly skeptical of our culture. Because if we're not, we become acting just like the culture without realizing it. What do I mean? So I love capitalism for the most part. It's one of the most, if not the most successful way of trying to create more wealth. It has a lot of problems. It has a ton of them. I'm not saying it's the best or good, but human beings, we're going to screw everything up. In that cultural Western mindset, we then start justifying excess. We start justifying stuff. We start justifying accumulation. Good things like saving for the future become ultimate things, and we're no longer putting the kingdom of God first. I went kind of way off here, but it's important to my heart. I know it's on God's heart because it's not good when we Christians get so intertwined with prosperity gospel, thinking that God is more concerned. And this is the most important part of this 4-minute tangent. We get real deep waters when we think God is more concerned about our material possessions than our character growth, than our bank account versus our spiritual changes and our ability to love people well and self-sacrifice. God does not care about our comfort. If anything, he will see that our comfort usually causes us harm. Comfort makes us lazy. Comfort makes us forget God. Comfort, I hate it because, man, I want comfort. I don't want to struggle, but often in the seasons of life where are the most difficult or even moderately difficult, I rely on God a lot more than when everything's just really easy. So it's a trap to think that when I just pray and I want, God is going to give me something. Sometimes he's not giving us things because it's not good for us. And actually that creates a whole lot of can of worms because I wonder why God does let prosperity gospel people have millions of dollars. It's not good for them. That's confusing, and that's something to wrestle with. But I say this because, I know that there's Christians of all walks of life, mature, immature, brand new, experienced. For those who don't know, this will destroy and cause a war in your soul, and it will not bring you closer to God to think that when I'm just asking for things. Now, I know we live in a black and white culture. Does that mean don't ask for a raise because inflation has sucked lately? No. Does that mean don't ask for help because you need to buy a new car because it's broken down, or you need some kind of material aid because you're struggling? No. It's a warning against wanting more. It's a warning against wanting things that we don't actually need. Again, that can be nuanced a ton, but hopefully you hear that, because the idea here is that when this verse, these promises are when we are seeking God's kingdom, when we are seeking him to be glorified, that's what it's saying. Whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. The Father will give you things when you're in tune and aligned with his mission. And his mission is not about our comfort, not about our bank account, not about our status. His mission is about Jesus being seen as the greatest, as the answer. As opposed to anything and everything else we make idols out of, only Jesus is the true answer for humanity. Those are the kind of prayers that Jesus wants to answer. 100%. Again, there's a lot of nuance there. He answers lots of prayers. But when you're using that kind of promises of God thing. So, spent a little more time on that than I meant. Apologies. Hopefully it made sense. And then it ends again with, this is my command. This is my command. Love each other. So this is where we're transitioning. We're going to, what does love mean? Love is complicated. Okay, so love can mean the warm fuzzies that we get sometimes. Love can also be very nuanced because love can be something very challenging. When, let's see, a personal example. When I have an argument with my wife, when we have a disagreement, when we're in conflict, and we can both do this poorly or well. I'm going to highlight the well for right now. If one of us has done wrong and we are humbly and kindly saying, hey, you did not mean to do this, but when you said this, when you did this, this is what it felt like, this is the impact it had. That's part of love. Part of love says, hey, something isn't right. I care about you enough, but see this tone. This is where I know I fail. I know like all of us fail because we're human. The tone is so important. Hopefully it's coming across. The tone is of broken, contrite, almost sad to have to bring it up because it's not a pleasant conversation, but the idea is an appeal out of love. This is never, oh my, you screwed up. You did that wrong. Blah, 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 whatever it is, and you're rubbing in someone's face. You're being defensive. That is not love. Love gives the benefit of the doubt. Love seeks to guard the integrity and dignity of the other. And that is partly how you fight and have conflict well, is you never name call. You never point out someone's flaws. You never use their insecurities against them. That is the opposite of love. So love can, this is what's hard to nuance, right? But love can be uncomfortable. I think of even, I'm raising this little boy. Love him so much. Oh my gosh. I wasn't expecting that little explosion of joy. But raising this little guy, and he's still young enough that he generally doesn't know when he's doing something wrong when he's not supposed to. But as that goes on, it would not be loving to not discipline him and correct him and say, we don't do that, we do this instead. Love doesn't let people walk off cliffs. But see, the irony of that too, the flip side of that coin, I can think of as a counselor, both first and second hand, talking about people with addictions and things like that. You can't stop people from destroying themselves. You can only do so much. You can only say, man, like it's the classic leading the horse. You can only show the horse where the water is. Lead it to water. You can't force it to drink. And that's a sad reality of saying, man, I care about you. I hate seeing you destroy yourself. I hope you choose life. I can offer this, this, and this, but also you have to do some of these things too. You have to make decisions as well. So those are maybe some of the surprising ways that we can love. But I really, really want to stress that, man, it is about your tone. It is about your presentation. It is about humility. It is about caring more about the other person flourishing and doing well than being right. If you want to have some conversation and comment to get your point across or to be right, it's probably not loving. I don't like that because I fail at that all the time. I really need to get better at that. So moving on, love can take a different approach as well. Love means caring to know about the person. What do I mean by that? Every person is so unique and different. So part of love means I want to understand as much as I can the intricacies of who you are, your personality, what makes you tick, what you're passionate about, what you care about. I want something, even if I don't like or understand those things, I can appreciate the joy and excitement that you share and you show when you're telling me X, Y, and Z. So love can be a part of delighting in other people. Love sees the good in other people and rejoices in it. It takes part in some of what they do because it's showing care. And similarly, love is also about building other people up. Encouragement. There's definitely not enough encouragement in our world these days where we see this is who you are. Let's just find there are people I know that, and I've done this, I haven't done this maybe great this season of life, but there are times where I'm generally, when I'm healthy, I'm an encourager. And I call it the good I see in people, an example, I do this all the time for my wife, but I'm like, you are so playful. I love your playfulness. You are so funny. You are so creative. You are so whatever. Seeing the value in other people and enjoying it. But then it goes further than that. You are such a caring person. You are so selfless. You are so thoughtful. whatever it is, calling out the good. You persevere. You've had such a challenging season or whatever, and you've felt your emotions, which you should feel, but you've also been steadfast in your faith. Whatever it is, calling out the good and appreciating each other. And sometimes, I wish we had more conversations like this where it's like, where are you struggling? Tell me where you're struggling. Maybe you need someone to speak life into that area of your heart or your area of your life, and asking for that and building those bonds that are open to that kind of conversation. So love can also be a sense of, think of like the love languages. I do a video on the 5 love languages. Very helpful stuff, very good stuff. Part of love is saying, I may feel loved when, for the 5 love languages is words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, quality time, and I think physical touch. I got them all. But the idea is, let's say mine is physical touch. We're typically wired to give what we want to receive. But that's not loving if the other person experiences love another way. That's where love is often selfless. It says, okay, you experience love this way. So even though it's a sacrifice, even though it doesn't make any sense to me, I'll enter into this and show you love that way, because that's what makes you feel valued and cared for. Here's another great example of love. Love is compassion. Man, I forget who said this, so I give them credit. Love is showing compassion, and compassion is entering into the suffering with other people. And as a counselor, I feel like it's ever important for me to distinguish, and I can do another video on this if I need to. There's a difference between entering compassion and suffering with someone versus being codependent and entangled and taking on their emotions as your responsibility. It's a whole nother topic. Not covering that. We're focusing on the more healthy approach that, like, I can have my own emotional experience, but I can suffer with you in this right now for this 10-minute conversation. And if it's something super serious, you've lost a loved one, a parent, a spouse, maybe it's several hours, days, that I'm suffering with you because that is awful. It's traumatic. So part of love is compassion. And compassion means we slow down the speed of the day because this human being matters. And so we listen to them and we care about them and we empathize, which really just means putting myself in your shoes. If that happened to me, how painful would that be? And I have to be emotionally engaged and aware enough to honestly answer that question. Man, that would really suck. It'd be a 5 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, whatever it is. And then realizing, oh man, I would need space to process. I would need support. I might need a meal. I might need whatever it is. Empathy is putting ourselves in the other person's shoe and being kind. Those are just a few examples of love. I'd love to hear more examples too. If you've got ideas, man, teach me. Maybe I just forgot to mention it. Maybe I just need to grow in my understanding. What are ways that we as Christians can love one another well? Whether in general or even specifically in this passage, I'm curious, like, what helps you be connected to the vine, Jesus? What helps you feel him change you? What helps, how do you experience his love? And how do you think we can love others better? I know I just asked a ton of questions. I would love to keep the conversation going, both in the comments and or follow-up videos, and keep this a dialogue. Maybe even invite someone on as a guest. I know I'm getting all excited throwing out ideas, but all that to say, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please comment, like, subscribe, share, whatever. But really, I hope that you feel more connected to Jesus. Hope you put these things into practice, and hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks. Bye.